This is just a short tutorial about making sure that you have a file association set up correctly. Now, if you try to double click just the GameMaker icon, for most of you, it won't actually start up GameMaker, and that's because the Mac operating system doesn't recognize the GMK file extension. When we were learning about operating systems, we know that it understands, for example, that .docx, .docx is associated with Microsoft Word. Or if you have an HTML file, then it will automatically open in your default browser like Chrome or Safari. But your operating system doesn't recognize what this GMK is associated with, and so you need to associate that to make it easier for you. If you right-click and say Open With, now probably that won't appear for you because you haven't associated it. You say Other, and you browse through your applications. And if you notice that GameMaker is grayed out, that's because it says Enable Recommended Applications. Those are ones that the Mac OS understands or knows about by default. So if I click on all applications, then you'll notice that it becomes available. So I'm going to have my GameMaker Lite app, and if I tick Always Open With, then it will always be associated with that application from now on. If you also notice, this is important for understanding about your operating systems and security, it's not known if this application can open Final Frontier to GameMaker. So because this is not one of the recognized programs of the operating system, then it's giving you that warning. And you know that it will work, so you can go ahead and open and then start GameMaker. Now to test that, if you exit out of the application and then just double click, it should appear. You should also now see the GameMaker icon. Before that, you probably wouldn't have seen the GameMaker icon associated with that file type. So that's just a lesson that you can learn about your operating system, and that's an important thing that you need to understand for your external topic. Another thing that we haven't talked about yet and isn't actually explicitly discussed in the GameMaker book is adding comments to your code. So let's just look at the spaceship still object, and you'll notice that I've added in a few code comments. They look like exclamation marks. It's really important, and for your internal assessment and also just in programming in general, that you comment code so that others can understand and you can understand why you put in the code that you did. When you go back and look at your code in future days, future months, why did you make that choice? And also if somebody else, for example me as an assessor or in the workplace, wants to look at your code to try to understand what is done, and why you've done that, and they might need to make changes to the code, etc., commenting is good. So it's just a sort of a plain English way of saying why, what you've done and why. So you find the code comments in the control section, and there's the exclamation mark, and then you can just drag a comment out. There goes the bell. And then you can type in your comment. So we can put this will start the spaceship moving in the direction that it is placed in on the screen. So you can just type a plain English comment. Now what I've put in this one is, if I hover over it, you should be able to see it. This piece of code will change the sprite to the correct subimage for the direction. Remember, we talked about that there are 360 degrees and there are 36 different subimages, so it'll take the direction that it's going out of 360, divide it by 10, and find the correct subimage. That's helpful so that you can remind yourself later on if you want to use this technique again, or that somebody understands why you're dividing it by 10. So I want you to get in the habit of commenting your code. It's not always easy to read your comments just by hovering over them. Another thing is that if you look on an object and you click the Show Information button, it gives you all the information about that object. So the fact that it uses the sprite spaceship still, it's solid. We haven't set it as a solid object, but we've set it as visible. And there is a difference between solid and visible. So visible, obviously you can see it, or it could be hidden for a certain amount of time. Solid means you can actually collide with it. Depth, we've talked about depth quite a bit, so it's at 50. Persistent is set at false. If we set it as persistent, that means that object could be used across several rooms. Parent, we'll discuss more later, but if I have, say, a whole bunch of enemies who all do the same thing, instead of writing the code over and over and over again, I can make one parent enemy and then make some other ones their children. And mask, that's sort of the outline of it. So, you know, what would be the collision area. And then we can see for the step event what comment you've made, and also what the actual code is. Set the sprite to spaceship still with subimage direction divided by 10 and a speed of 1. So it basically explains your code in plain English, and this is really helpful for you to look at. It's helpful for you for troubleshooting. All right, so we'll end this part of the video, and I want you to get in the habit of using code commenting and looking at the code information.